Hello everybody, today we're going to be reacting to Asian Stories Part 2. I made a Part 1, check it out.
Headset ready to game with my friends, but I quickly realized it wasn't my friends I was hearing. It was two men mid-sentence. The store closes at 10. The other replied, good. The owner's son usually stays behind to lock up. My hands froze because my parents owned a store. Just a few minutes away from my house, they had a Japanese restaurant.
Have you ever noticed that AI can do this?
Every night after school, I helped
Animated
them
hand
close.
by
I leaned
hand.
closer to my headset and then I heard,
Look at the expression, just look at the expression.
the back entrance doesn't have a camera. My stomach dropped. They weren't talking about some random store. They were talking about mine. I immediately messaged my friends, get online right now. Within minutes, 4 of them joined my lobby, but that was my biggest mistake because I heard the sound coming through their mic. They heard, and my heart stopped. The voice on the other end went completely silent. Then one of the men said, did you hear that? Nobody spoke. The other man replied, someone's listening. My entire body went cold. They knew. I instantly disconnected the call. I called my parents, no answer. I called again, nothing. I grabbed my bike and raced toward the store. The entire way there, I kept telling myself I was overreacting. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe it wasn't my store. But when I turned the corner, I saw the front door wide open. The lights were still on, and
Maybe
something
it
was
was.
wrong. Shelves had been knocked over. Glass was scattered across the floor. The cash register was open. But the strangest part was that nobody was there. No customers, no employees, no parents. I ran behind the counter calling their names. Mom, Dad, nothing. Then I noticed something on the floor. Footprints. Fresh, muddy footprints.
IQ that Asian guy's gonna escape and the other
And sleeping
people
from the
gonna...
entrance straight toward
Oh,
the
let's
back
go
room. I
get
slowly
arrested.
followed them. My hands were shaking because when I looked back, I realized something. My own footprints were everywhere, going in and coming back out. But those footprints only went one direction, toward the back room. Whoever made them never left. I put on my head.
Oh, I didn't finish it.
I handed my dad my report card. He stared at it, then walked into the garage. A few seconds later, I heard metal scraping across the concrete, and something heavy slammed into the wall. I stood outside the garage door, too scared to open it. The only thing on my report card was 1B. Up until then, I had never gotten anything below an A. That night, I barely slept. All I could think about was what my dad was doing behind that door. The next morning, I finally opened the garage. The ping pong table was gone, and so was my paddle. The one he'd given me when I was 6. I looked through every closet, every cabinet, until I spotted it, sitting on my dad's shelf. I reached for it, but he stopped me. You're done playing. I looked at him. Because of 1B, he didn't answer, and for months the table stayed gone. My paddle stayed on his shelf. And after a while, I stopped thinking he'd ever change his mind. So one night, after I heard him snoring, I crept into his room, and I grabbed the paddle, and for the first time in months, it was back in my hands. And then I turned it over, and there was a name, carved into the bottom. My dad's? I froze. This wasn't my paddle, it was his. The next day, I went back into the garage, and behind the shelves, I found an old box. Inside were dusty trophies, then pictures of my dad, about my age, holding the same paddle, standing beside those same trophies, and at the very bottom was an old report card. 1B folded inside it was a note. No more ping pong until your grades improve. I just stood there staring at it. That's when I understood. My dad wasn't angry. He was terrified. I'd
Genetics! Because smart.
end up
Genetics.
just like him. That night, I found him sitting alone in the garage. I held out the paddle, he took it, and ran his thumb across the name carved into the wood. I asked, did you ever miss playing? He looked down at the paddle and smiled every day. And after a long silence, he looked at me, then quietly said, help me set the table back up. We played our first game together, and this time, neither of us kept score. I handed my dad my report card. He stared at it and
W!
walked into the garage. A few seconds later, I heard
wow,
metal
that's
scraping
all.
across the
Oh damn. I just watched all of his stories. I didn't watch this though. Hold up. I didn't
Every
watch
lunch, my dog wouldn't stop barking at me over and over. I put on my headset, ready to game with my friend. Every lunch, I opened my mom's homemade dumplings. Before I could take a bite, the bully pinched his nose. Your food stinks. Then he knocked my lunch onto the
stink.
floor. His friends laughed. The bully looked at me.
Feel like this is Chester. This is Chester, but you know, Asian. You understand what I'm saying, right? Yeah. Yeah, I understand what I'm saying.
What are you gonna do about it? I looked down, picked up every dumpling, one by one. Then I said, not yet. The next day, he dumped my lunch into the garbage. What about now? Not yet. A week later, he shoved me into my locker. His friends surrounded me. You gonna fight back? Not yet. They laughed even harder. Months passed, everyone thought I was scared. What nobody knew was every night I'd wake up and see the kitchen light on. My mom still wearing her work clothes, folding dumplings long after midnight. She had work the next morning, but she still made them every day. Before the sun came up, I was training, running, lifting, learning learning how to fight because every morning I remembered those dumplings lying on the cafeteria floor and I trained harder. Then one Friday, he grabbed my lunch and threw it away before I even opened it. I looked down at the dumplings sitting in the garbage. He laughed. What? Your mom can just make more. Then he leaned closer. It's not like she has anything better to do. For the first time, I looked him in the eyes. After school, he stopped laughing. What? You and me, we're done waiting. He smiled. You better call an ambulance. You're gonna need one after this. By the final bell, half the school was waiting outside. The bully stepped into the circle, laughing. He finally grew a spine. I took off my backpack and set it on the ground. I didn't say a word. He charged and threw the first punch, but I could see them, the punches. Before they happened, left hook, I ducked. Right hook, I stepped aside. Another punch, missed. Another, missed. Months of training made everything feel slower. The crowd started cheering. The bully got angrier. He swung harder, faster, but he couldn't touch me. Then he stopped. He looked around and grabbed a brick. The crowd went silent. For the first time, I stopped moving because I realized dodging his punches wasn't enough. I'd spent months learning how to avoid getting hurt. If I didn't stop him, someone else would get hurt next. He charged, holding the brick above his head. I waited until the last second. Then I stepped forward and threw one punch right on his jaw. The brick fell from his hand. His eye rolled back. His body went limp. He hit the pavement. I looked past him at every friend who laughed, who shoved me, who mocked my mom's cooking. One of them laughed. What are you looking at? I looked past him. Not you. The ambulance. I called for him.
That's cold shit. Damn. Oh, we did that. So, bye.